Okay, on today's show, lots of bank accounts will be shut down, smart motorways are to be banned, and women's safety has unfortunately been abandoned with this latest move. Let's begin. The article says that illegal immigrants will have their bank accounts shut down in a new crackdown by the Home Office, who have been accused of demonising asylum seekers. The Home Office announced it began sharing data with the Financial Secretary on Thursday so it can refuse to open new bank accounts and close those existing accounts of people who are in the UK illegally. It said that making it difficult for illegal migrants to access financial services is an important tool to help deter illegal migration, as it prevents them from working illegally or using a benefit system. Human rights charity Amnesty International UK accused the government of using private companies to impose its hugely damaging immigration policy. Banks will not be required to check customers' documents for their migration status, but the Home Office will share details of illegal migrants, and banks can then check their personal current account holders against the list, and anyone with outstanding immigration applications or appeals will not be affected, the government added. The initiative is part of the government's push to curb the number of migrants coming to the UK. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said access to key banking services, including current accounts, is crucial in aiding those here unlawfully to gain a foothold in British society. Banks will only close accounts when the Home Office has made further checks to ensure the person is still in the UK without permission to stay. To be honest, two things stand out for me here. Firstly, obviously you need some sort of ID to open a bank account, don't you? So as we often hear, that quite a lot of illegal boat people often chuck their ID in the water, or it slips out of their hand, or whatever excuse they want to say on the way down here. Then either the ID they're giving the banks is some sort of fake, in which case why is it not being picked up, or their ID is actually official, and in that case, for whatever reason, it wasn't picked up by the border force people, in which case why? And secondly, you would have thought that as people need bank accounts, for the majority of situations, that the banks would have been allowed to check if the person has a right to be in the UK in the first place. And I'm guessing that if they were allowed to do such a thing, then maybe, just maybe, they probably wouldn't have granted at least half the accounts that they probably did to them. And what's all this stuff about a damaging immigration system? It's a points-based immigration system, which other countries I'm pretty sure have as well. Let's take for Australia, for example. They have a points-based immigration system, but I doubt people over there refer to it as damaging, do they? It just seems that sometimes certain globalists or lefties, whatever you want to call them, would just prefer that we didn't have one at all, or even check people's details on entry, and therefore who knows what sort of criminal records people would have that would be letting in, which is why we've got an immigration policy in the first place, isn't it? And when people come over illegally from, of course, the safe country of France, who as far as I'm aware aren't exactly at war, then in my opinion they should just be turned straight back round, because they were already at a safe country, weren't they? And before anyone says, what if France doesn't accept them because of a criminal record that they have or whatever, to them I'd say, well, why should we accept them? Because surely if France doesn't want to put its citizens at risk, I don't see why we should really be putting ours at risk. And now I am not talking about the genuine refugees without criminal records. I'm only talking about the illegal boat people or future Labour voters or whatever you want to call them that are coming over here illegally when they are not entitled to do so. Obviously we have a points-based immigration system for a reason, and if we just allow people to come over here illegally, then surely that's just making a mockery of the whole thing, isn't it? So there has to be some sort of deterrent, doesn't there? So I myself think it's quite good that they're actually doing this sort of crackdown, because surely the only people that will affect is the people who are here illegally and have no right to be in the country at all. Campaigners have criticised the axing of an emergency helpline to protect women in the wake of Sarah Everard's murder and called on ministers to commit to making our streets safer. BT's government-backed 888 Walk Me Home service was designed to track journeys and trigger alerts if users fail to reach home within a certain time. Women were also supposed to be able to use an app on their phones to call the police if they felt threatened. But of course, 18 months later, after Sarah Everard's killer Wayne Couzens, who abused his position as a police officer in 2021, was ordered to spend the rest of his life in jail, the scheme has been scrapped. Charities and public figures have described the empty promise as meaningless and a waste of time and demanded that more be done to keep women and girls safe. The phone line, backed by the then Home Secretary Priti Patel and estimated to cost £50 million, was meant to be operational by Christmas 2021, but last night it was confirmed that it has been binned. A spokesman for BT, which also runs 999 calls, told Huffington Post, "We've developed a solid body of new technology. However, it became clear that over the course of our work that it does not make sense to launch a new BT service, but rather to share our our learnings for the new wider benefit of others already working on this. Anyone that is concerned about their personal safety should continue to dial 999. The Home Office previously said it welcomed joint working between the private sector and government, but a spokesman last night said the 888 phone line for women was a BT project, not a government scheme. Well, personally, I think scrapping this is a major setback for women's safety altogether, because surely something like this would have cut a lot of crimes that would have taken place otherwise, and therefore made women feel a bit more safer on their way home, and put a lot of people off from even thinking about committing such crimes, especially if it was widely broadcast that such a service exists. We've also got to remember that there's bound to be lots of 999 calls for other things as well, surely meaning that someone who would have been able to call 888 would be waiting a bit longer to actually get through to someone. I mean, hopefully that wouldn't be the case, but there's always that possibility, isn't there? At the end of the day, I'm guessing it's probably all to do with money, isn't it? They want to cut back or use the money for something else, but if they wanted to cut back, then I think they should have still kept the 888 system going, but probably not had such things where you could call police from the app, because you don't need an app to call the police, do you? Just dial 888 or 999 or whatever on the phone instead. And even though the spokesperson said that it wasn't a government scheme, personally, I think it should have been. I mean, BT is obviously a private company and obviously has to make its profits. But if it was passed on to the government, then BT wouldn't have to worry about that, and therefore it hopefully could have continued, or at least got off the ground, thereby making women feel safer surely all over the country. And yes, obviously you're bound to say that women shouldn't be walking home by themselves anyway, but we live in a free country where people can walk home by themselves, so women shouldn't have to feel that there is a reason why they can't. And surely at least this app would have given them a bit of reassurance, because people, men or women, shouldn't have to feel worried about walking home, should they? If for whatever reason they need to walk home, that is. Rishi Sunak may ban smart new motorways from being built altogether amid safety fears. They have already been put on pause for 5 years for more research after campaigners said they were death traps, but the PM is said to be considering ditching them altogether and not waiting for any more evidence to come in. And it comes after an inquest heard that a crash on a smart motorway that killed 2 pensioners would not have happened if there had been a hard shoulder. The newspaper reported the project would be scaled back significantly and future routes abandoned. Derek Jacobs, who was 83, and Charles Scrimps, who was 78, both died after a crash on the M1 near Sheffield, and the PM vowed to ban them during last year's leadership race. Well, I wonder which one that was, the first one where he lost to Liz Truss, or the second one where he got voted through by 100 MPs, and not actually anyone from the public. Of course, don't get me wrong, I'm all for smart motorways getting banned, and the mere fact that the hard shoulder was taken away in the first place, to be honest, was surely a danger from the start, wasn't it? I mean, yes, of course, they've got those lights which are meant to put an X in the lane if you can't go through them, but if it takes a while for someone to notice someone who has stopped or crashed or whatever, then that person is surely being put at risk with every passing minute, all to save people a little bit of time by creating an extra lane out of the hard shoulder. And of course, whilst I'm sure they were probably trialled a little bit in some areas, they, in my opinion, needed to do much more research before rolling them out the way they have done. And of course, whilst it is a good thing that Rishi is saying that he'll ban them, it just makes me wonder what's taking him so long. I mean, surely he should be doing it now, but something tells me he's probably going to wait for the 2024 manifesto that he will of course put forward for the election, which will no doubt cause more lives in the process to be lost. That needn't be otherwise. And yes, while people are bound to say, well, if you're worried about them, don't go on smart motorways, but at the same time, we shouldn't be in a system where we have to worry about going on smart motorways, should we? Personally, I think the whole smart motorway system was a bit of a cost-cutting exercise, because rather than somehow building an extra lane onto a motorway or building a new motorway completely, they came up with this botched solution, in my opinion, in getting rid of the hard shoulder, which, if I remember rightly, all those years ago when I took my driving test, in the highway code it said, you never drive in the hard shoulder, which is actually what smart motorways are asking us to do. And yes, obviously the highway code has probably been updated to take that into an account, but hopefully it will then revert to that if and when the government bans them, or at the very least finds a way to make them safe using some sort of automatic computer system or something like that. But then again, of course, computers can go wrong, can't they? So, to be honest, I think it's actually better to scrap them altogether and just go back to the way we were, with a good old hard shoulder. But what surely is a giant kick in the gonads to every driver out there is what they're planning to do in this video, which, if anything, has got more to do with money than I'm guessing anything else. Anyway, subscribe for more and I'll see you in the next one.